September 1st, 2025. Well, I haven't really checked back on the Grow Lab potted plants much over the summer. They were struggling over the lab over the winter because I was pretty neglectful about it. Just had other things in my head and wasn't as passionate over the winter about the Grow Lab as I usually am. But we're coming around to fall again here, and I definitely have to bring some of these back in to save them. And so I'm going to try and do the lab justice again this year. And so to that end, I'm trying to consolidate plants. I got a bunch of pruning I got to do here on the Meyer lemon. This thing is flushed back out with new leaf growth, but it needs to be trimmed down. And I'm going to transplant it up to a bigger planter. I think it's feeling pretty constricted in that crate. And then the rosemary that I took cuttings of last fall has thrived along over the summer and grown into some small bushes already. So we're going to consolidate those down into a couple of different planters. The turmeric is doing well. The holy basil is doing well, and there's a bumblebee going through some of the holy basil. Look at those bright orange pollen sacs on hammerhead. That's a different type of holy basil. There's actually 4 different types. The only one I found that I like is this one right here. What else? We got the fig is growing back and actually starting to produce figs again. So that's going to have to go back in. Don't know how we're going to fit that in. Might take advantage of all that new growth and take some new cuttings of that. Although I don't want to crowd the lab up immediately. The citronella plant here needs to come back in. And there's a bunch of ginger here and ginger in that planter. And there's a couple hidden in this planter and a couple hidden in with this turmeric, which did manage to flower a little bit this year despite my neglect. So that I'm going to consolidate all the ginger, I think, into what I had the garlic in last year. It's a cement mixing tray. So I've cleaned that up and put that in the lab. And I picked up a new tool to make soil mixing easier. So this is the new tool to make soil mixing easier. This might look kind of familiar if you watched my channel for a long time. I had a nice commercial version of one of these back on the old farm. But I sold that when I had to move to BC because I couldn't really take it with me. And I couldn't get anyone to store it here. So I had to buy a new one, and it's pretty nice, but it's not as well built as the commercial one that I had. But it should do the job. It's a 4 cubic foot cement mixer. And if you know anything about the ProMix bales of soil base that I use for mixing soils, those ProMix bales are 3.8 cubic feet. So I should be able to drop a whole bale in here and all our soil amendments, spin it over, pour it into crates, and be done. And that probably saves at least a half an hour's worth of work for each bag of ProMix that I blend. So that's going to be really handy. It's going to save some time. And more importantly, it's going to give us a much more uniform soil mix. And that's super important, especially in a grow lab where, we're already in sort of a compromised environment, and in crates where we don't have huge depths of soil for plant roots to reach out into and seek out what they're after. So you want a nice, good blend. So this will help tremendously. The other benefit that I get out of this, and the primary reason that I got this, is so I can finish the fence up at the farm, because I got to pour concrete in the bottom of all those fence posts, and I didn't want to mix concrete by hand, because if you ever done that, it's not much fun, and it takes a lot of time, and it's pretty messy. So this will make it go a little quicker. These are the other 2 crates of ginger, and I guess I should just point out at this point, these 2 crates were an experiment we did in the Grow Lab last fall, where we used the rooted leaf nutrients as a test. And I gotta say, I usually run advancing eco-agriculture nutrients if I'm going to do foliar feeds or drenches. Everything else I do dry amendment mix in the soil before we go in. Sometimes I'll top dress and water in a dry amendment. but I never tried the rooted leaf before. And it seemed to give us a nice growth response initially, but I have to say that this bin has stalled hard since about November last year, and it is just starting to recover now. So, not great results on that. And this bin has been in the Advancing Eco-Agriculture program, and just got another shot again recently of that. But basically over the winter, it had been in that, and then it hadn't been fed with anything for most of the winter and in through the spring. So, as a side-by-side comparison, Advancing Eco-Agriculture is winning that one, hands down. September 1st, 2025. And wow, look at the traffic on this right-hand hive. Holy cow. Look at all the pollen coming in. Endless traffic. Large volumes of pollen. Middle hive is reasonable level of traffic. Got a scout checking me out. Left hand, the 8-frame hive. Doing very well. Lots and lots of pollen and resources coming back in there too. Good traffic. The little fawn's growing up quick. Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025. Just back to check on the farm. Mostly here to trade batteries on the bee fence. So we just take a look at things quick. Our sweet clover is taking off nice. So is our red clover. And I'm sure our white's mixed in here as well. Pretty dry again though, so slower rather than faster. And again, you can see the distinct line between the potato block where things were foliar fed and where there wasn't any foliar feed. So you can see where the edge of the strip ends. Drops right off from green to less green. Just have a look at one of the potato plants down here that's doing reasonably well on the end of the row here. Got quite a bit of leaf structure on it. You can see where new leaves have grown out. There's another one. And a giant daikon radish. But overall, not a whole lot. So up here looking at the cover crop block here. And it is quite evident in the reduction in green since yesterday. And all the chewed off tops everywhere. That the deer are doing a number on this cover crop. And that sucks because I'm not able to complete this fence right now. I need to get concrete still. I just got a cement mixer. I'm getting the pieces together, but we're not there yet. Thursday, September 4th. Got up a little early this morning, so I thought before I started work I would just check on the honeybees and have a look at their activity here in the buckwheat. And yeah, we got some honeybees in the buckwheat. Yeah, quite a few, along with some bumblebees and other wild pollinators. In fact, They're all through it. So it looks like they're still nailing this in the morning. And that means they've been collecting honey from this for, I don't know, a month or more while it's been in flower. We've managed to hold continuous flowers on the crop. Let's go have a quick look at the hives before I go to work. So we just have a look at the cover crop here in the morning sun. That's a beautiful sight, despite the hard grazing. Looking good. You know, the light is not in our favor here, but we've got a ton of traffic coming in and out. All three hives. Very organized inbound and outbound traffic. Lots of pollen coming in and out. And now, since we caught them in the morning, we know for sure they're working the buckwheat out in the potato block there. So that's phenomenal. Maybe we'll still pull off full third box of honey on these hives. So last night I started importing some of the plants to the lab. I brought in some of the rosemary, some of the ginger, and I'm mixing up soils and letting the soils cook to get ready for fall season. And prepping and actually looking forward to going into the lab this fall. Last year I wasn't very inspired about it, but this year I am. And I did a major prune on the Meyer lemon tree here to get it down to a manageable size and give it a chance to reflourish. And that's getting transplanted into a bigger pot soon after the soil cooks a bit. So I'll just give you a peek in the lab here. Transplanted all the ginger into some pre-mixed soil and some recycled soil, and some of the soil that was in with the ginger. That's all in this big cement mixer tray. I think maybe we can make that thrive in here over the winter. And the rosemary is in. And I realized with the cool nights that the lemon verbena would probably appreciate a more comfortable environment. And there's some sweet potato in here. Guess somebody likes my cover. Thursday, September 4th, evening, 5:30 or 6. Inbound thunderstorms coming. So I was hoping to get some winter rye down in the potato crop area out front. I got to Agway and got to seed, but I want to finish planting it so I get a good spread and, you know, a good set. So I'm not going to do it today, but we have more rain forecasted for tomorrow. And I honestly don't even know how much we're going to get out of this. The storms look intense, but it looks like a short line. So we'll just have a look at the honeybees here. Pre-storm activity. And they're still, wow, they're hauling in like crazy. Excellent traffic. Lots of pollen coming in, I see. We just take a look at the cover crops around the honeybee hive here. And I apologize, I just have the phone camera today. I don't have the nicer camera, but look at our cover crops in here. Our clovers are all starting to fill in a little better now. Got some holy basil mixed in with that. Looks like the deer have been grazing that as well. Wow. And some of the more mature stuff here they haven't touched. It's pretty strong herb. It's probably a little overpowering to eat as a meal. But so that's awesome. So we know the honeybees have been in here working. We saw them in here last week. And Things are greening up nice. And if we get a shot of rain today and some rain Saturday, that'll really perk these things up. And then once we get that, I'll come through and do a light foliar feed on some of these cover crops. Probably not everything, but maybe. But definitely like the big block in the front and the new cover crop block in the fence. We should also take note of the goldenrod in bloom here. And we got bumblebees and wasps and bee flies and all kinds of pollinators in it. I don't see any honeybees in it, so they must be grabbing from another resource. Look at all the bumblebees here. Wow, look at all the wild pollinators in here. You see, guys, this is why you can't use Roundup and herbicides to keep every single little fence line down. Look at the environmental impact you have in just reducing, if you took all those flowers out, look at all those pollinators that are gaining resource and food and energy from that. That's why you gotta leave your ditches and sides a little bit. I mean, I get it for needing to control weeds, but there's ways to let weeds come through and be beneficial and not do soil damage and not negatively impact native pollinators so heavily. They're equally as important, if not more important, even than our honeybees. Apis mellifera, our honeybee, is not native to the U.S. We'll just have a quick peek at the grazing paddock, because that's basically what it is now. Look at all this grazing. Chomp, 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 chomparoo. A little bit more of the grazing that is going on the cover crops here. I need to finish that fence very soon. I'm getting very close to ready with all the parts I need. Look at how hard they graze this stuff down. Now there is a benefit in that. Remember, when we prune the top, we tip the balance between cytokines and auxins, and that will make those roots explode back out. And when these grow back, they'll have an even stronger, more robust root system, which will make a stronger, more robust plant, ultimately, and so on and so forth. Also interesting to note the patterns here of the yellowing in different spots. So just crunching some basic concrete math for posts. We have 32 posts, and then each bag of 80-pound bag of concrete is 0.6 cubic feet. Each post, if it's a 4-inch diameter hole poured 18 inches deep, needs about 0.135 or 0.14 cubic feet. So then we're looking at about 4 bags a hole or so. All total, it looks like about 9 bags. Maybe as much as 10 with loss in the mixer and all. Should do all these posts in concrete, 18 inches deep, 4-inch diameter hole. And we probably can do less than that because we have a 2-inch steel pipe sitting in there. And if we pour concrete in, then there's a 2-inch volume cut out of that core that we're not filling with concrete. I haven't decided. I might fill them with concrete. I might pour it and then set the post in it. We'll see. I got some research to do on that. So along by the beehives here is a stray daikon radish seed. Well, plant now. Look at how big. Huge. So you can see why this drills really nice channels into the soil. And then when it dies off in the winter and the spring, we get a nutrient flush from it because all that matter, all that root, breaks down and feeds the soil microbes. pretty nice system for one plant. Grazed all upon, of course. Look at that. Again, we have these giant channel digging roots that'll release nutrient in the spring for us. Times 10, no. 100, no. 1,000, no. 1,000,000, no. 2 million maybe? Couple few. Yeah, and by the way, that's like yoking back and forth hard pretty good on it, and it just doesn't even barely budge. So that tells you how tight that soil still is and how capable those are at penetrating deep clay soils and opening up some really nice channels. Oh yeah, in the last update video, I talked a little bit about using Fieldlark AI to guide some of my crop and farm management practices. I talked specifically about a lot of the buckwheat mow down straw and knockdown straw being on the ground here, specifically as it relates to seeding rye into this soil that is really dry right now. Like really dry, and that these raised beds are a bit hard still. We still got a lot of soil building work to do in here, but we're making some tremendous progress. And what we did this summer with the daikon radish and the buckwheat and the heavy cover crop and the foliar feeds, and now not cutting the soil up and not disrupting all those microbial communities and networks and fungal hyphae, we're set up for a real win. And then now we're going to broadcast some winter rye seed into this, and if we can get that established with the upcoming rains here in the next couple of days, that'll set us up for a living root crop through the winter, so we can still be photosynthesizing and sending root exudates and sugars into the soil and building that soil carbon matter and total energy storage battery basically up. So we can continue to do that through the winter if we have crops that will survive the winter. The buckwheat and the daikon radish will both frost kill. So we're going to try and nurse up another crop that will come through the winter, and then in the spring we'll deal with that. We'll either brush hog it as it starts to flower, or roll it under if I can figure out a roller between now and then, and maybe plant down through it somehow. But we'll figure out how we're going to manage that in the spring. We'll see how dense it grows in, how well it establishes, how well it does over the winter, and of course how well it holds up to the deer. I'm sure they will be out here grazing very heavily this winter, because where else can you get really high quality nutrients and lots of trace minerals? Right here, and they know it by flavor and scent immediately. And us humans should know it, but our sense has been tricked a lot by a lot of chemical tricks in the food world in recent years. Checking back on our clover crops. We've got lots of green coming in now since we buzzed the buckwheat canopy back. And the buckwheat is throwing out some flowers still. And this morning, of course, we saw how much honeybee activity there was in this block in the morning when the nectar is high in these flowers. And so the other thing that we're going to have coming spring is all this seed will be sitting here over the winter, assuming the animals don't eat it all, and they never get it all. And in the spring, that should give us a buckwheat cover crop popping up as well. So it'll be a little bit of something to combat before we can plant in here, but it means we're building soil and making soil gains and wins 24/7, 365. And that's huge. That's tremendous. Think of that. 6 to 8 months of the year in the winter, when everybody else just lets their soil lay dead, we're still pumping exudates into it. We're still enhancing microbial communities. We're still building soil aggregate structure. 6 to 8 months of work being done. Well, everybody else says, oh, just let it rest. No, feed it and let it thrive. There's that line moving at us. Those weeds are probably 12 or 15 feet tall at least. Just imagine the photosynthetic and regenerative capacity of grasses that tall. C4 photosynthesizing plants. They can photosynthesize day and night, just like the corn over there. But look how huge those plants are. There is so much leaf matter there photosynthesizing. And imagine, those are truly healthy plants. If they have 80% root, 20% plant mass on top, think how much root mass is down below the ground, looking at how big those are on top. Friday, September 5th, 2025. Picked up some rye seed for planting into this existing cover crop so we can carry a living root through the winter and continue building soils through the winter. I'm going to broadcast right into the existing cover crops here. I was planning originally just to do the potato block on the right hand side here, but I figure I might as well do this side as well, and then we'll have another living cover crop in here. There shouldn't be too much competition for the clover, and if it proves to be too much, I'll come back with a brush hog in the spring and knock it back and let the clover through if need be. But that should set us up for a solid living root over the winter so we can continue enhancing biology and building soils. We got, I don't know exactly how much, but I'd guess about an inch of rain last night, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But a solid good rain that was long overdue, much needed. And today already I see the daikon radish throwing flower sets. These were not here yesterday. And so these popped up. I mean, I don't know how much of this, but I would say a good portion of this came up from yesterday to today, probably from here to here in under 24 hours. That's pretty impressive. And that is another indicator of how well we're doing at building soil with these cover crops despite our loss of a potato crop. Just thought I would stop and get a shot of this before I went through and did some broadcasting. Look at that, we got bumblebees in here working. And I'm guessing as this flowers out more, we'll probably see honeybees in it as well. So yet another benefit from the cover crops. Just take a look at the clover here quick. You can see how much bigger these leaf sets are and how quickly this is starting to fill in since we got a little bit of rain and it got more light coming into it. Of course, I'll point out again, you know, we only had a couple of foliar feet, light ones, on the left-hand side of the cover crop block here. But on the right-hand side, we were trying to maintain and keep up nutrient levels for potatoes, which are a higher nutrient demand crop. So foliar feeds were much heavier, and you can see a very clear line between the two. So after the rain, we got lots of flowers popping, like you saw the daikon radish, and I'm sure you can see there's a lot of white in the buckwheat here. Same out in the potato block there. And so that said, honeybee traffic is up even more today. Look at that. And interestingly enough, this 8-frame colony isn't too far behind the other two colonies from a traffic perspective. Just a quick closer glimpse at the cover crops here post-rain. Really greened things up and brought up our turgor pressure. Those plants are perking up and sitting up nice despite all the grazing. So, September 5th, 2025, planting winter rye, broadcasting into existing daikon radish and buckwheat cover crop, mixed with some potato crop. We may harvest some of the potato crop if anything is harvestable or worth harvesting certainly not going to be production scale. It would just probably have some to eat. That'd be kind of nice, but whatever. Point of this is I paced off our width here because I did calculations at home in Google Earth and checked them on CAD, and it's always good to verify in the field. So I paced off. We're about 60 foot wide by pacing, and I know we're about 400 foot long in this block. So that makes this block about 24,000 square feet, or just about 0.55 acres. 24,000 over 43,560 square feet in an acre. So that yields us about 66 pounds at the 120 pounds per acre rate, which is what's recommended by Fieldlark AI, given what we're broadcasting into dense cover crop, and that we can't cultivate, cultipack, or roller press to make better seed to soil contact. We're going to try to take advantage of the moisture in the soil that we have right now. Overnight tonight, we should have a pretty heavy dew. We have rain in the forecast for tomorrow afternoon and into Sunday a little bit. So hopefully we'll get another inch of rain or so. That'd be phenomenal. That would help drive our seed soil contact in better and give us adequate moisture for germination and help us get our next cover crop established in our existing cover crop. So I'm going to blast this block first. I'd love to use my seeder, but there is no way that I can get down these rows with a seeder and not just get hung up or have stuff wrap around the seeder. And I don't have a machine that'll get in here and break this up. And I have not built a seeder that I can run on the Ford up above the canopy yet. And I don't have time to do that. So it's going to be by hand. Kind of a pain in the butt, but it'll set us up for a much better season next year, even than we did this year for soil building, and it'll give us good weed suppression in the spring and so on. So I got the first 4 rows from left to right, seeded down. Come back and I'm pouring some more seed. I'm just having a cigarette break here and looking at things. I see this daikon radish that's been chewed back so heavily. And this giant daikon radish root sticking out. What a monster. Look at the size of that root. And it reminded me of a point I wanted to make, was that one of the great advantages of cover crops like this with a giant tuber on them, doesn't really matter whether it's a turnip or a radish or whatever, but having this huge tuber is a huge starch and nutrient reserve. And so that works out beneficial when the winter freeze happens and all that nutrient's released back in the spring for the new plants. But up until that point, it's one heck of a reserve for this. And I know it was down at this end of the row yesterday, the day before. This was not chewed off. So this is fresh, like yesterday, maybe the day before. And already we see new leaf growth shooting out. And that's in big part because this plant has such a huge reserve in those tubers of nutrients. So that's another great thing about this type of a cover crop. You know, you could graze right back to the ground and it's got so much reserve it'll pop right back up and grow back again. And then of course, don't forget in the picture of this, the cytokine-auxin balance, where if you chop a bunch of the top of the plant off, you change the balance between auxins and cytokines. Auxins being shooting tip growth and cytokines being root growth for the most part. And so again, you take away a lot of the auxins. Now you have this excess of cytokines, which will promote a flush of root growth. And then from that root growth, you'll get a flush of tip growth back later on. So lots of interesting interactions going on in this one little chewed down piece of daikon. And so I figure while we have this opportunity and I'm here thinking about it, looking at it, doing it, I'll just go ahead and we'll pull this one daikon radish with this big root, and you can just get a sense, if I can pull it without it breaking off, you get a sense of how deep of a channel these dig and how deep of a nutrient column they leave behind for spring. Let's see if I can pull one of these with 2 hands free. Yeah, okay. Oh, look at that. It's relatively short, that one. Okay, but picture that where they're set in the ground better, where they're flush to the surface when they germinate. And that's a short one. They can get up to 18 inches in depth, so you could be looking at a radish shoot like this, cutting a hole in the ground, and then when that radish dies back over the winter, in the spring, all that nutrient becomes available to the plants. So now we've cycled nutrients in the soil once again, and that's a fantastic thing. I might just stick this back in, and it'll probably keep growing anyway. So we'll just take another break here and observing things. And I should mention, one of the most powerful tools you have on a farm is your observation skills. And you're either logging or your memory or a combination of those, or even better, if you have video. Big part of why I record video a lot is not just for the channel, but also so when I want to go back and look at the details of something, figure out what I did and what happened later, I can go back and figure out exactly what I did. Anyway, I was observing around here and noticing a lot of the clover here. Here we are actually out beyond the end of the row, but I made sure to let some of that clover overseed out into the end of the row. And you can see it getting established all through here already. And that's a nice perennial crop, nitrogen fixer, pollen and nectar producer, favored by the bees. So that'll give us a lot of advantage. Well, that is seeded extremely heavy with rye. I calculated 66 pounds just for this block. I put down more like 85 or 90 in here. And then over on the strip here that runs all the way up, I put the rest of a total of 124 pounds. So we're loaded heavy. And given the recent lesson about over cover cropping, I just should mention that the only reason I'm not afraid to seed extra heavy on this is because it's a winter cover crop and there's no cash crop to compete with. So worst case scenario, we'll have a nice thick canopy in the spring. Not too concerned about that. Chances are the deer will graze it back over the winter. There won't be as much here as you might hope for without such grazing pressures. But we'll see how it all plays. We'll see if we get the rain tomorrow, and we'll see how our germination is and go from there. Okay, so I thought I would follow up on the Fieldlark AI guiding our work here. So I said, I measured the area where the potato blocks were. I said, that's 21,000 square feet. How much rye should I broadcast? And they break it down, and they talk about the seed to soil contact, timing with moisture, light disturbance, you know, like with a cultipacker or a harrow, daikon radish residue, competition from existing cover crops, etc., etc., etc. But basically what they say is about 80 pounds per acre to 120 pounds per acre, considering the conditions we were working with, which equates to 38.6 pounds to 57.8 pounds for 21,000 square feet. So, and I didn't get it down that night, but I was kind of like pre-gaming for what I wanted to do. And I said, we got about an inch of rain last night. That was Thursday. With another inch of rain forecasted for tomorrow, which is Saturday. If I broadcast tonight, how much does this affect seeding rate? Should I adjust? I said, that's fantastic news. They're basically still saying target the higher end. So I targeted the higher end and overshot a bit. I also seeded a little bit bigger area. Ended up being about 33,000 square feet. And so going down to implications of high seeding rate, because that's really what I wanted to touch on for this video out of this. Exceptional weed suppression. The dense land of winter rye will be incredibly effective at outcompeting weeds, providing a clean slate for your next cash crop. This is a huge win for dynamic equilibrium and reducing future limiting factors. Maximum biomass production, We're increasing biomass production to its maximum capacity on that block, basically. Superior organic matter accumulation, extensive root systems, with winter rye renowned for its fibrous deep root system. This high density will create an unparalleled network of root channels, further improving soil structure, aeration, and water infiltration, thereby enhancing water management. Enhanced carbon sequestration, because we're building biomass, because we're photosynthesizing through the winter. Intensified nutrient cycling, because we're scavenging more nutrients and building more biomass, and consequently we're going to have more nutrient cycling going on because of that. Robust microbial feeding, both through the root exudates, and then of course if we incorporate the crop when it breaks down again, that'll feed microbes again. And sticking with the anti-fragile design, we're making our cropland more resilient and more capable of stretching a wider range of difficult conditions. With spring management potential considerations, with such a high biomass, you want to plan your spring termination carefully. Roller crimping or flail mowing will be excellent options to lay down the dense mat, creating a thick, weed-suppressing mulch for your subsequent crop. This will be a significant amount of residue, which is generally a good thing, but requires proper management. Your decision to broadcast 124 pounds of winter rye tonight, especially with the favorable moisture conditions, is a bold and highly regenerative move. You're maximizing the potential for soil health, weed suppression, and carbon building in that block. This is a fantastic example of leveraging ecological first principles to create fully thriving agricultural ecosystem. And then I said today is the 6th of September. We released at least an inch of heavy rain. It might have been more like 2. We had a lot of rain Saturday in some heavy periods. And that just gives us optimal germination, establishment, ample moisture for growth, reduced erosion risk, and enhanced nutrient cycling. So that puts us on keel. Just thought I would share where we're rolling along with the Fieldlark AI, and maybe I'll take another excerpt of this for shorts for people who are interested in a shorter format.
While we're out here planting another cover crop out front, I thought we'd just jump in and have a look on this cover crop here. Let you have a look-see at the grazing pressure that's going on here. You notice they're just going for the tips. That's most browsers, if you give them lots of free open terrain, they'll go for the tips, more tender shoot stuff. And so you don't get that hard graze down like you do in a factory farm lot where they're trapped in the same spot overgrazing for forever. And we'll get to talk more about that when we go and visit Dirty Dog Farm. They're also here in Livingston, and they're where I get my grass-fed beef from. And we'll talk about all of those rotations and things, and how grazing should really work, and how cows should really be treated, and so on and so forth. But for now, I thought we would just take a peek here. I haven't looked under this mulch since we planted the garlic, so I thought we'd pop up a spot. Oh, never mind. With the rain, we have garlic sprouting up through. So that's awesome. Yeah. One there, one there. Only a few so far, but that's fantastic. In that case, I won't disturb the mulch. There's another one
down in the lower corner here where there was a little bit of cover crop and the edge, just to fill the edge in. And I just wanted to catch and show an example of what happens as the buckwheat flowers out, finishes out, goes into senescence, and dies back. And all of a sudden that canopy that was absorbed by all those buckwheat leaves and plants in the way falls back. It turns a yellowish color, so it actually reflects light better. And then all of a sudden we see all this green, beautiful clover coming in the under canopy of it, giving us a nice cover crop. So when I talk about nurse cropping, this is exactly what I mean. The buckwheat gets a root established, helps keep the sun off of soil, directly off the soil,
photosynthesizes, builds soil, releases phosphorus, and protects the slower emerging crop underneath, the clover. Gives it a little bit of shade, a chance for a little bit more moisture, and a chance to get going. And then as we either brush hog off or the crop senesces back, the secondary crop comes in. It's a really nice system for getting one crop to help another, and at the same time doing a multi-species cover crop, and on down the list of other benefits, all stacked in one synergistic stack. That's what we try to do in regenerative agriculture. Synergistic stacking, combinations of positive soil beneficial things stacked together, amplify each other. And then of course, if something happens and you lose one part of that stack, it's not a critical loss because it's just one component of the stack. The other amplifiers are still going. So Sunday, September 7th, we got heavy rain Saturday and then showers on and off all night, Saturday night into sometime this morning. So I think we probably got our seed driven in nicely by the rain. We got good moisture, and I would think we probably got pretty good seed to soil contact. And looking here, look at that. Oh, look at that. We already have sprouting winter rye. So there you go. And I'm guessing we're going to have a pretty high germination success rate. So we're going to have a really dense cover crop in here because I went back and crunched the numbers from the planting that I did on Friday. And I went a little heavy on seed. I was trying to make sure I got everything covered. And I put down 124 pounds of winter rye seed on this whole block. The east end, west side, and over where the clover is. And that works out to about 164 pounds per acre, which is really high. And they recommended 80 to 120 given dense canopy and such. But the upside is that we don't have any cash crop competing over the winter. So the denser the mat, the better. Also, I have to keep in mind in the context here that this area gets grazed very, very, very heavily by the deer. Winter and summer both. So chances are when a lot of this comes up, they're going to be in here grazing again. And so they'll be having an impact on that. So a little bit denser planting will probably work in our benefit. Just looking at the clover cover crops here, and those are starting to really take off nice with the light getting down into the canopy better. And I'm going to try and come back here and put down a foliar feed, a relatively light one, but I want to hit everything in this cover crop block and the new fenced area cover crop block as well, and just give everything a good supportive foliar feed boost, just to keep that growth and photosynthesis maxed up and build soil as rapidly and with as much vigor as we can, because this will be our soil energy bank for next year. So I'll just show you some of the puddles here. You can see where the water ran along the road here. More puddles here in our farm roadway, and you can see where the water ran down from the puddles down the lower channel points there. So we got some really nice rain, really good timing on that. I should also mention, when I planted this with the winter rye, I came back, I had a little extra in the bottom of the bucket at the end, and I had wanted to come back and make sure that these side edges of these raised rows got hit with seed. And so I kind of cast into the side of the row to make sure that we had good contact. And again, we have germination of winter rye seed all over the place in here. So that's an excellent confirmation on what we were trying to achieve. Here we are up at the fenced area. You can see we've had a lot of heavy grazing in here, but the green stays on, the growth continues, and the soil building continues. And even the grazing gives us a gain in a roundabout sort of way. Here we are up by the beehives. Our usual puddle area was filled up during the rain event, so we've sequestered a bunch of that water into our soil profile. Real good traffic today on the beehives. I'm sure that with the recent rain, we've got a rush of nectar and pollen again coming back out of the flowers. A good rain always gives it a push. And I was going to step into my usual standing spot here in the holy basil, but there's so many honeybees in the ground, I didn't want to step on anybody. I also see a yellow jacket there. Taking a honeybee. So it's that time of year when the predatory insects start coming in. There's a bumblebee scouting the honeybee hives. So all of our clovers are springing back with the rain. And I see pollinators in here working the holy basil now. So that rain is bringing on another flush of the holy basil flowers. That's excellent timing, going into the middle of September here soon. So we'll have an excellent nectar and pollen crop to help build up colony health and resources for the end of the season before the cold comes on. And I know it probably looks really sparse, but this is how clover is when it's just starting. And all those sparse little green spots will fill into a clover canopy eventually and give us a really nice nitrogen fixing cover crop. Once again, you can see where our puddle settled here, so we know we sequestered a huge portion of that water into our soil profile. And that's in our reserve now. We got a forecast the next 10 days, supposed to be 70s in the daytime, lower to mid 70s, and lower to upper 40s at night. So should be excellent growing weather, especially when I get back here and get a full Monday, September 8th. Just getting back to the farm now. It's about 6:30. Just thought I'd check in and see how our germination is looking. And we got root tails coming on. And I see lots of the same here. So that's good. And I was hoping to get a foliar feed on tonight on all of our cover, maybe tomorrow. Days sure are getting shorter fast. Just a quick glance at the cover crop block here since we got the rain. Nice and green and uniform. And even grazed back nice and even. Just having a peek at the garlic here. Looks like those are starting to pop up nicely. And so on and so forth down the row. And even up through the buckwheat straw. So that's good. And hopefully this coming weekend I can get some concrete in and we can get some posts up. And hopefully this week I can get a hold of the generator. So I can get up here with a jackhammer and drill out the rock I need to drill out to finish post holes so I can set some posts and at least run our first run of fence around and have some sort of a barrier
at least slow the deer down. Always grazing. Man, those are some nice venison steaks though, huh? Sun's dropping pretty quick, and it's cooling off pretty quick. We're into September for sure. But we've got lots of nice returning forager traffic. And I see lots of pollen coming in still. I was hoping to open these hives up today, but might have to push that off till tomorrow or Wednesday. Gotta have good light and warmth. We don't want to be opening hives up as it's cooling off and give our colony a chill. Well, from up here, all that green and beehives and rolling land sure looks nice. We started out with a whole lot of cedar trees and rough terrain. And we're finally starting to get refined out to farmland again. And it's going to be some beautiful, productive farmland when I'm done getting it set up.